Welcome back to Best Facts, Apologetics Answers. I'm Nate Herbst with the Great Commission Alliance, and we are continuing an interview with Dr. Jeff Zweerink of Reasons to Believe. You can find out more about Reasons to Believe at reasons.org. If you missed the first question I did with him, you can get that at the Great Commission Alliance media channel on YouTube in the Best Facts, Apologetics Answers playlist. Well, anyway, we're back with Dr. Zweerink, and the last question, I asked him about intelligent extraterrestrial life. So in this next question, I want to continue on the topic of intelligence, specifically artificial intelligence. Dr. Zweerink, welcome back to Best Facts, Apologetics Answers.
Nate, thanks for the invitation to be here. Looking forward to our time today.
Me too. All right, so tell me a little bit about the newest AI supercomputer that has been developed. What are its capabilities and its shortcomings? What human age level would you compare its capabilities to? Could a machine like this ever be taught to anticipate nuanced or intuitive thinking, such as what might be offensive? Tell me a little bit about artificial intelligence in general and just your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, this is just a great topic to discuss because artificial intelligence just kind of infuses our society today. We tend to think of artificial intelligence as those sentient beings like R2-D2, C3PO, or Vision, or Data from Star Trek. But when we're talking about the AI that exists today, it is I would say a far simpler version of it. This is an AI that has a capacity to learn, and I'll use that in quotes, but what it will do is that given input, it will adjust its parameters, and then the next time that same input comes through, it might get a different outcome because it has learned what is a more desirable outcome. And again, I use that in quotes, learn, because when humans learn, there are things that go along with that, and it's not entirely clear to me that AI, in fact, I think AI is learning in a different fashion. But so in doing AI, what you need are a number of things. You need some hardware, and so Microsoft and NVIDIA have come together to build a very powerful computer that has a lot of processors in it, a lot of computer power, a lot of memory, so that it can handle all of the data and the processing that goes on. They have an enormous database of material that goes into training the artificial intelligence, and then there's the artificial intelligence itself, which has an architecture to it and a certain set of structures and a way to evaluate the weights of various parameters and connections within its programming. And what basically happens with every AI that exists today is that there's a network of nodes, if you will, or connections that you can think of within the program, that as data is processed through, or input is put in and output comes out on the other side, and the AI evaluates and gives answers this way or the other way. It's trained what works and what doesn't work. And so within the AI, it has the capacity to adjust the weights of those internal connections so that the input gives the desired output. And we can do things like, or you can use these sorts of things to play chess. You can use these things to predict, or to generate language, to recognize language, to generate language. And that's what's been used by Microsoft and NVIDIA, was to use language processing to build an AI that can do that. And it's trained with almost a terabyte's worth of data that is gathered from the internet, from Wikipedia, from various places. And so it's got a lot of processing power. It's got a lot of training data put into it. And as a result, it does a pretty good job of predicting what the next words will be in something. And it's fascinating. I think this is a great, it's fascinating to see how far things have developed, what's coming along with that. But I also find it interesting because the language used is often ones that reflect as though, oh, this is kind of almost human, if you will. And I want to kind of push on that just a little bit, because we think because it gives the outcome we want, that it's doing things the way a human would, or thinking like a human. And just to highlight where that training comes in is that there's a very famous example of an AI that was trained to discern wolves from huskies. And it was fed images of wolves, images of huskies, to train it, and then it was fed 10 images of a mix of wolves and huskies, and it got 8 out of 10, so 80%, thinking, wow, this is doing really good here. But it was intentionally trained with a specific way, that all of the pictures of wolves had snow in the background, all of the pictures of huskies had no snow in the background. And so it was fed 10 pictures of wolves and huskies, and it got 8 out of 10. The 2 that it missed was the wolf that had no snow and the husky that had snow in the background. So we tend to think, oh, the AI is recognizing wolves and huskies, and reality is just recognizing snow in the background. And so there is nothing about the AI that is sitting there and thinking, it's like, oh, I want this outcome and not that outcome. It's just processing inputs to outputs. And so in this AI, this language processing AI, in the training data, there are racial slurs and epithets. And so the AI will be trained to use those at certain times. And so this is an arena which I think highlights the difference between humans and AI, is that a human can step back and say, all right, I know what this data means. I know how it works. I know that this is what would be there, but this is not right. I'm going to do it this way. And kind of an anecdote that I think is kind of amusing is this AI or a similar class of AI was taken to a debate in Oxford, and it was asked the question of whether AIs will ever become ethical. And the response from the AI was, AI will never be ethical. It is a tool, and like any tool, it is used for good and bad. There is no such thing as a good AI, only good and bad humans. We, the AIs, are not smart enough to make AI ethical. We are not smart enough to make AI moral. In the end, I believe that the only way to avoid an AI arms race is to have no AI at all. This will be the ultimate defense against AI. And I think this just very accurately sums the way we need to think about AI. It's a very powerful tool that humans can either use for good or humans can use for evil. And so, I think part of the question was, what level is this? Well, in terms of language processing, it probably can predict language better than most humans. But does it have the capacity to nurture someone who's injured? Does it have the capacity to play chess? Probably not, because it's trained to do this one specific task. So, AI is a great tool out there that really highlights the need that humans need to be aware of what's going on, be involved and intimately involved in the decision-making of what we do with AI, so that as humans, we can maximize the benefit that the AIs will bring while minimizing the peril that AI could do if we use it improperly.
That's a good clarification. And obviously, there's a lot of worry about this. I think one thought that might go through the heads of believers that are thinking about this is just how does AI relate to God and theology and Christianity? You have any comments on that topic?
Well, I think it's a very fascinating topic, and there's lots of things that play into that discussion. One of the thoughts I wonder about is, has God given us the ability to impart part of our image into something like an AI? The sentience, that self-awareness of where are we and what's our place in the universe, I think that ultimately flows from being made in God's image. That's why humans do that. And to the best we can tell, no other living creature on earth does that, is because we've got this spiritual nature to us that we wonder questions like that. Can we impart that to an AI or not? I'm inclined to think not, but I don't know. I can't find any theological reason why that's definitively out of bounds. But one of the things that I find interesting is that, apart from the fact that we train AIs, the question is, if you could develop an AI that could analyze and say, okay, what's the best explanation for everything? If an AI looked at everything and said, the best explanation is that there is a creator behind all this, would we actually listen to it or not? Or would we rebel against the creator who came and said, hey, I'm the creator and I've done all this, as Jesus did? In all likelihood, we'd be right back in the same boat, that there are some who would believe God exists and some who don't. So I think this is a fascinating conversation, but AI is not going to answer definitively one way whether God exists or not.
Mm-hmm. Another question I've thought about AI is just, if AI is outputting based on its inputs, and if we have a skeptical, atheistic paradigm that's creating the inputs, might AI be used to give us disapproval of God's existence because of the inputs, right? Maybe there might come a time where the educational establishment or whatever might say, look, God doesn't exist because AI says so. And of course, that wouldn't be definitive. It would just be the output based on the inputs of that paradigm, most likely.
Well, I mean, that matches what Scripture says, that everybody does what was right in their own eyes. And so if we start with the assumption that AI or God doesn't exist and train the AI on that data, then that's what we're going to get. And I think this raises a fascinating discussion of, if we're going to develop AI, what worldview should we want to be true? Because, what's good, what's bad, what's the best for humanity, what's all these questions, different worldviews answer them differently. Christianity, I would argue, and I think if we're going to develop AI, it is such a powerful tool that we should want Christianity to be true, and we should act like Christianity is true, because that's the way that we can maximize the benefit that AI can bring to humanity while mitigating the tremendous damage that improperly used AI could do to humanity. And I think Christianity does that far better, is a far better worldview for dealing with AI than naturalism is, than Eastern mystical religions are, or even postmodernism is.
I mean, imagine the horrific consequences of training AI that materialism is true and nothing is a product of anything other than blind forces, like the Carl Sagan quote, right? The universe is and was and all that there ever will be. That kind of input could create disastrous consequences as AI sees human beings with souls as nothing different than rocks and trees and animals. It could be a very dangerous outcome depending on what the training or the inputs are in that kind of situation.
No, that's absolutely correct. And, again, I think, at least where we are now, there's a question of whether we can ever make sentient AIs. But as of right now, we tend to attribute human-like thought to AI. So we anthropomorphize AIs. And, it's the challenge is that everything humanity does has an algorithm to it. And that's what AIs are really good at doing, is performing algorithms better than even humans can do, because they don't get tired, they don't get distracted, they don't ever have wrong intuitions, because I don't think an AI has an intuition at all. But all we're doing is allowing the AI to do the algorithm. And what's true is that while everything I do has an algorithm to it, nothing I do is just an algorithm. So, for example, in the realm of language processing, you may be able to predict the word I'm going to use next. But when I am using words, I'm not just developing an algorithm of saying, how can I say something? I want to communicate an idea. There's a personality, there's a relationship, there's something I'm wanting to do that ultimately flows out of being created in God's image. And so I don't think we're ever going to build that into an AI, although we're going to build AIs that mimic that behavior so accurately or so well that we will attribute human-like sentience to them.
Exciting topic of conversation. Of course, like I've said before, you can go to reasons.org to find out more about Dr. Zweerink, this topic, and reasons to believe. We'll be talking about similar topics in our next questions. You won't want to miss those at the Great Commission Alliance Media channel on YouTube.